Hello, and welcome to another episode of Wednesdays with We. I am delighted today to have a couple of guests on our program. One is Amy Cuttrell, who is a We founding board member and been a part of our organization since the beginning. So thank you for joining us, Amy.
Thank you for having me, Jackie.
Oh, you're welcome. And Carla Mahrt, who actually was at our very first We conference in 2017 and has been a big supporter of We since the start. So thank you, Carla, for joining us.
Thank you, Jackie, and good to see you, Amy, as well.
Good to see you too, Carla.
Well, I just wanted to pull you both together today because I thought, Carla, maybe we can start real quick, but just saying, what do you do in the industry? What is your experience, and what are you hoping to accomplish in the industry at this point in your career?
Sure. Well, my entire career has been in the electronics industry, primarily with manufacturers, large manufacturers of electronic components. Most recently with TE Connectivity, but I left there about 10 years ago, and I had always been in sales roles, never HR recruiting roles. And lo and behold, I started my own recruiting firm. So I knew my focus would be the electronic components because that's where my connections are, and I love the industry. So I was excited to try something new. And so I recruit primarily kind of middle to senior level managers within the electronics industry. Quite a few technical positions, engineering backgrounds. They might run a sales team, but they're an engineer by education. So I work with manufacturers, with distributors and reps, some of the EMS providers as well. So it's just me in my business. So you get me from start to finish, which can be good and bad, I guess. But it's been a great run. It's been 10 years, and I enjoy really working with a number of different people that I maybe didn't get to work with in the past. A lot of them are connections I made 20 years ago, and some people are people I met last week on LinkedIn. So it's been an interesting journey and a super fun one too.
Well, thank you for joining us today, because I think it's really important to note that, you have worked in the industry for a long time and you know the industry. So that is really critical. And Amy, you have been in the industry for a long time in different aspects. So why don't I just turn it over to you to kind of explain your journey?
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, I've been in the industry for a little over 20 years. I started working for a manufacturer back in my 20s, and I stayed on the manufacturing side for the majority of the career. I worked for a company called Bivar, I worked for a company called Ecliptech, and the last position that I was in at a company called ILSI was a frequency control manufacturer. I was the director of sales. And an opportunity came up for me to switch over to the distribution side. So a little over almost a year and a half ago, I took a role as a business development representative with Aero Electronics. And then actually recently I was promoted to a manager of the business development representatives at Aero Electronics.
Well, I think that this is an important conversation to have, because as women, and especially right now, it even applies to men too, but since we are on behalf of women in electronics, it's important sometimes to note what our blocks are sometimes when we try to go to those, maybe apply for next position, or within our own company, go for that next level. And really, Amy, I thought we were talking the other day, and your story was pretty amazing, and it really struck me what you said about taking a next position, but it being in an area where you felt you needed to develop yourself. So maybe I'll turn it over to you to elaborate on that.
Sure. So most of my career in the electronics industry had been on the supplier side, and distribution is such a big piece of everything that we do in the electronics industry. And while I had gotten to a director level in my company, it was a smaller company and I was ready for change, and I had always felt that I wasn't as familiar enough with distribution as I wished I was. And I wasn't a super technical person either. So an opportunity came up for me to take an individual contributor role. So it was stepping out of management into a new role with Aero Electronics. And it really gave me a lot of information, a lot of experience in a side of the industry that I hadn't had before.
Well, I think that's important to note, because when you take a step back sometimes and you fill those, we were kind of talking recently, it's like you know, when you're studying math, if you skip a whole grade, sometimes you miss some foundational stuff. So
Exactly.
it's almost like that. Yes, in our industry, we have such a complicated channel. Carla, you might want to comment on that a little bit because you've worked in different aspects of the channel, and sometimes in order to go to that next level, you have to have a real understanding of different aspects of the channel on a deeper level. So anyway, I'll turn that over to
Yeah, too. So most of my time in the industry has been working for a manufacturer. Started with Vishay, Dale Electronics, and then worked for a distributor for a very, very brief period of time, less than a year. And then I went to Raychem, who eventually became TE Connectivity. So that was my whole path. The really great thing about working for a distributor, even though it was that short period of time, is I really could empathize with them because I was on the other side of the fence. So I saw manufacturers, multiple manufacturers, and how they handled distribution, their policies, their procedures. And even though some of them weren't competitors to each other, they were competing for my mind share as a distributor. So that short period of time really helped me, I think, be a better, more empathetic manufacturer managing the channel than if I had not had that experience and been with the manufacturer the whole time. And so when I look at candidates today, it might be a candidate for maybe running a sales team for a distributor. But if they worked for a manufacturer before, or maybe they came out of the rep industry, they really get to see kind of the full view of it. And I think it makes them a better well-rounded employee. So I look for that when I interview candidates to see have they been in one track their entire career, or have they kind of been able to see different sides of the industry. So it's valuable.
Right, and I think that really helps with the relationships as well. So as we all know, in the electronic component industry, it's extremely relationship driven, right? And so the more aspects of the channel you can hit, the better. But, you know, I'm so curious, Amy, because I think that move you took in your career also demonstrates a lot of emotional intelligence, because I think a lot of times we look at ourselves and we think of where do we want to go, and we think it's always a step forward. But in order to be strategic, you have to have a plan. You have to know where you're going to get to. And sometimes you take a step back in order to step forward, right? And so
Absolutely.
I feel like that's amazing. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been a great experience. And to your point, I think there are times as women where we really need to take that big step forward when the opportunity presents itself. But then as a person, there are times when we have different opportunities that are presented to us. And there was just that piece of my knowledge base that I had always felt like was missing. So it's been a great experience to go back and fill it in and really get good and try and really understand the perspective from distribution. Yeah, it's been a great experience.
You know, as you talk about taking big steps, when I left TE, that was a big step, right? Big, stable, secure company. When I left there, I didn't have that behind me anymore. So right. I think that makes you take stock in who you are and all the experiences that you've had, because you're not going to step into EDS or ECIA conference and have that big name behind you. So you had to make your own name. You had to make your own way. And I think that as scary as that is, it's really empowering as well. I think sometimes women have a hard time accepting that and taking that big leap because it might be more comfortable not to take that leap. But
sure.
It might be less rewarding if you don't. So
absolutely, I would agree.
Yes, and you know, I have to say, Carla, I love what you just said. Take stock in who you are. I'm going to quote you on that, and make your own name. Those are two amazing takeaways from this session, because I agree with what you're saying so much. And to your point, I did do the same thing, stepping out on behalf of women in electronics. And like you said, it's insecure sometimes. You're vulnerable. You are making your own name. You're making your own way, and you don't have this big company behind you. And so it's sink or swim. And so it's just taking stock in who you are and where you're trying to go, and know that to give you the confidence to lunge you forward, right? And so any final thoughts before we end? It's like, gosh, these sessions go so fast. Is there any final thoughts before we end?
And just one thing to add, maybe, you know, a lot of it is taking stock in yourself, but at the same time, there's a lot of people behind you, ahead of you, to the side of you that are really advocates for you. And it's important to have those people. It's not always women, it's not always men. It can be a combination. It doesn't have to be even people from your industry. It could be a neighbor, it could be a pastor or whatever. It could be, you know, different people in your life. But I think it's important to have that advocacy, that mentorship. And I know we started a program on mentoring in particular, which is fantastic. But I think that's important too, because those days when you're not as confident, that gives you the confidence to keep moving forward. So I think it's important to be strong yourself, but also have strong advocates around you.
Very good point, Carla. And, you know, just to make the announcement, we are in our next wave of mentorship program for women in electronics. So final applications, I think, are being submitted now, but this is an amazing opportunity to connect the industry. But Amy, any final thoughts on that with career, mentorship, relationships, tying the whole thing together before we sign off?
Absolutely. Women in Electronics has been a fantastic experience. Not only have I gotten to know other people in the industry throughout North America, but in my own local community, which has been a fantastic experience. I love the opportunity to share and talk about different roles, different challenges that we all face. So I just would definitely recommend and encourage anybody, if you're on the fence and thinking about joining, to attend a chapter meeting. It's been a great experience for me.
Oh, well, thank you for that little plug. Appreciate that very much. And we appreciate everyone listening. Carla for being here today. Amy for being here. I know you have very busy schedules. So we appreciate your participation and we look forward to talking to you soon.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Jackie.